Hi everyone, in this video I want to talk about 7 different ways that living in Germany changed my perspective on life. I'm originally from Liverpool in the UK, but I spent 8 years of my 20s living and working in Hamburg in Germany. On this channel I talk about different mindsets, lifestyles and ways to approach life. So it's only right that I reflect on the 8 years that I spent living in Hamburg, some of my most formative years as a young adult, and ask myself, what exactly did I learn from that experience? So let's just get into them, and do subscribe if you want to hear about all that other good stuff in my other videos. So the first thing I want to talk about is social consciousness, and a really good example of how the UK differs to Germany is the way that we treat our railway systems. It's so interesting to me that a city like Hamburg, which has over 1 million people passing in and out of it every day, doesn't feel the need to police its railway network with that much authority. In fact, it's very rare that you'll get stopped and asked for a ticket. In the UK, there's barriers at pretty much every train station, and you do have to have a ticket or a pass, otherwise you're going to get a fine. The level of trust that is afforded to Germans who use the railway networks is immense, and I remember one English friend of mine who was pretty used to just bumping every train because he didn't see any real reason to pay for it, was told off by someone who you'd consider to be a pretty laid-back German guy, who sort of said, you know, you're defrauding the city by not paying for a ticket. And it's really that mindset that the Germans are in, that public services are there to be supported and there to be paid for by everybody. They really feel like there is a collective responsibility to look out for one another and for the good of public infrastructure. Another good example of this is this thing called Mittagsruhe, which is essentially certain hours in the day, maybe between 11 AM and 2 PM, where you're supposed to just keep things quiet. You're not supposed to play too loud music, you're not supposed to create any disturbance, because it's kind of understood that people should relax at midday and not be disturbed by their neighbours. Now that again is quite challenging to someone from the UK who's used to being able to blast out music on a Saturday afternoon, but actually when you take it from the Germans' point of view, it's right that we respect noise pollution. I think it's just a really interesting take on the way that we look after our collective surroundings that we don't really think of in the UK. And that brings me into number 2, which is that it's okay to go at your own pace. I always think that in the UK, everyone is just in a rush all the time. We prioritise convenience over getting things done properly, and we rush through university and our careers without really thinking about what we're doing. Compare that to the German experience, and you can be a student until your late 20s, possibly even your early 30s. And it's all because during that time, between your semesters, you're encouraged to take internships, figure out what exact kind of job you want to do, maybe go travelling and broaden your experience there. Generally, there's no push to get you hurried up through that system and into a job straight away. And once you're in a job as well, you'll find that the atmosphere is much more relaxed and laid back than it is in the UK. People are generally more flexible with their working hours, and they don't really push you through a career at a breakneck speed. I think something that's always really difficult to get their head around to people from the UK is just how quiet Sundays are in Germany. You can walk outside on a Sunday morning, even in a big city like Hamburg, and it can feel like a ghost town because you're just wondering where everybody is. But actually, once you get into the swing of it, you start to realise that they're going to have brunch with their friends, they're going for walks in the park, and with time I grew to absolutely love Sunday mornings in Hamburg. It's got an amazing cafe culture, so there's loads of places that you can get, or you can eat breakfast, or just really nice cups of coffee, meet friends and chat, and then go for a stroll through a city and maybe just sit off in a park for the rest of the day. And you never really feel pressured that there's anything to really worry about. It might sound surprising to some people, but the German lifestyle is just so relaxed, and Sunday just brings all of that to the fore. There's something amazing to me as well about the German breakfast routine on a Sunday, where they just empty the entire fridge onto a table, maybe boil some eggs, and then people just sort of pick at it through the morning and make little like brochens. It's just an amazing way of eating breakfast. I absolutely love it, and it's something that I've tried to keep up here moving back to the UK. Something else that you have to confront when you are a Brit living in Germany is that now there are real seasons and you have to prepare for them properly. If you don't have a proper winter coat by the time it gets to January, you will have frozen long ago, and you need to get proper winter boots, not just to protect you from the rain, but to protect you from the ice, because when it gets really cold, the pavement frosts over, and it's really common to actually fall over and injure yourself. So as a result, you'll also get loads of salt granules, like just all over your flat, and you'll have to hoover like every day to get rid of them. On the other hand, when it gets to summer, it's really hot as well, so you have to actually make adjustments for a hotter summer than you're probably used to in the UK, certainly in the north of the UK. It made me realise that living in the UK, we're just basically in permanent autumn, where it's always just a bit grey, rainy, maybe some quite sunny days. I mean, that's okay, I love autumn. One thing that becomes really clear though as well is how seasonal German diets are in comparison to the UK. In Germany, there's a specific time every year when all these like asparagus and strawberry stalls start popping up on every street corner, selling the fresh fruit of the season. It's really interesting how crazy Germans go for this white asparagus that they grow. They eat on pizza. I think they like dip it in sauce hollandaise, but they really go mad for it, and it's like a genuine like cultural phenomenon that like, this is now asparagus and strawberry season. And likewise in the winter, you'll have the winter markets that are selling things like grünkohl, which is basically like kale that's been cooked for a really long time with these like sausages and a specific kind of pork. It's just amazing to see how seasonal the German diet is compared to the UK. I really don't think that we have that, certainly not in cities in the UK. I actually grew to love that seasonal approach to buying food, and it's something that we've kept up even since moving back to the UK. We've got a chart in our kitchen that just shows all the different fruits and vegetables of the season, and you find that you get much better produce, and it's just so much better for the environment to buy food that's in season. So we've kept it up, and I think it's a great approach. I think more of us in the UK should take that approach to our diets. Bringing the tone down slightly for tip 4, but it is a really important difference in the German and British psyches, is just how that we think about our collective history and the past of our countries. Obviously, thinking about the Second World War is really difficult for a lot of Germans because they have to face some real genuine atrocities that were committed by the people who came before them. The openness with which the German education system and German culture does that is really interesting from a UK perspective. There are also very difficult things about our own past that we're just not taught about in schools, because Germans are confronted with the truth about what happened very early on in their education. I think they grow up with a different outlook on the world, and they basically want to make sure that nothing like that ever happens again. If you compare that to the way that we're taught history in the UK, I just don't think that we get the full unbiased narrative of some of the bad things that have been done as part of the British Empire, for example. And for that reason, I also can't claim to be an expert on British colonial history, but I will point you towards David Olusoga and a book called Natives by Akala for maybe a different perspective on British history. One thing I do find interesting is that having grown up in the Liverpool area, which was a significant port in the slave trade, I never really got taught about that history in school. The slave trade was always something that happened in like a Texan plantation or somewhere in America. It wasn't really something that happened on like the very shores of the city where I grew up. Nowadays you've got the Slavery Museum in Liverpool, but we just don't confront our history in the same way that Germans have to, and I think that that's part of the reason why British people these days tend to be quite inward looking compared to Germany, which I would say is kind of more open to the European project. I mean, I've probably lost all the Brexiters at this point, but who cares? I'm just going to move on anyway. I think the reason that I'm able to say this as well is because when you're a Brit living in Germany, you're constantly challenged about the British-centric view of the world that you have. You have to sort of address maybe some of the stereotypes that people have about you as a British person. Some of it seems a bit over the top, like Germans will always criticise British food, when really German and British cuisine are fairly similar. But some of it is really pertinent, and you'll get some questions that make you think about where you came from, and just that self-awareness really just makes you see the world in a different way. I feel like I'm so more open to different cultures and perspectives, and so more culturally knowledgeable than I would have been if I'd never lived in Germany. I know that sounds really cliche, but it's honestly the truth, so there you go. And that leads into number 6, because there is a misconception about Germans that they are rude or impolite, but actually when you live and work in another country, you just come to realise that there are different understandings of what it actually means to be polite in the first place. As Brits, we can find it uncomfortable when people are too direct with us, or maybe too open, maybe they tell too much of the truth, and we actually find that a little bit confronting and insulting at sometimes. In Britain, we're much more implicit with our language, and we're much more likely to suggest no rather than say it directly. But from a German point of view, that comes across as insincere and in some cases even dishonest. Over time, you start to pick up on these things and see things from the German perspective and realise, yeah, actually, you know, it's not that people are impolite, it's just that people have different ideas of the world, and you kind of need to accept that there's validity in some of those as well if you haven't been raised in that culture. Over time, I actually grew to like this form of directness much more than the kind of indirectness that I was raised with. I stopped saying sorry over time, I stopped prefacing my point of view with an apology, and I basically started leaning into difficult conversations, which has actually made me just a much stronger and happier person, because I really know how to get my point across now in a way that I didn't before living in Germany. Number 7 is also the way that Germans challenge consumerism and to an extent capitalism in a way that we don't in the UK. In fact, I'd say in the UK we kind of let capitalism run wild a lot of the time. But in Germany, you know, it doesn't really matter if something's got an amazing package or looks really good on the box. It's the quality inside that matters. When I walked into German supermarkets at first, I was often sort of taken aback by how unappealing a lot of the products looked. As a Brit, I kind of care far more about appearance naturally than a German would. Like, they would be much more focused on like how good the product is in and of itself, and that's kind of enough to sell it. In a lot of ways, you know, where I used to think that they were behind the times, they actually look a lot more forward thinking, you know, in terms of things like data privacy. I do feel like I've become less materialistic as a result of living in Germany, and I spoke a little bit about that in my intentional living video, so I'm going to pop that up here so that you can click through to that if you want to carry on the journey with me. But in the meantime, I really appreciate you watching this video. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope that this video has given you a good sense of what it's like to live in Germany and some of the differences between the British and the German mindset and experience. Please do subscribe if you want to see more content like this. It does really help me, so you know, you can't blame me for asking really, can you? Anyway, that's it for now. I'll see you in a bit.